we switch to English, and hopefully somewhere I see David, but can you? Because the first speaker of the day is David Sweeney from the UK. Unfortunately, he couldn't come, but we are really proud and happy, there's David, that you are present on the screen. David is the chair of the Research England, and Research England is the organization that is responsible for funding most of the research work at the university level in the UK. And all over his career, David has been working on impact and on research strategy. We really look forward to your presentation. Normally, I would say, David, the floor is yours, but in this case, I would say, David, the screen is yours. So let's start with your presentation.
Thanks very much. Can I check that you can hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Excellent. And let me bring up my presentation, which of course is not quite appearing, but let's just, here we go. Can you see that presentation?
Yes, you.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks very much. It's a real pleasure to be with you. I'm really disappointed that I can't be there in person. I had booked my rail fare, but recent events make it not possible. There were 4 reasons why I wanted to be with you. The first is that I'm...
David, could you put your presentation in the present mode?
I will indeed do. How is that?
Yes. Yeah, great, thanks.
Thanks. There are 4 reasons why I wanted to be with you. One is that I'm running the largest research funder in the UK, large research fund universities, and very keen, obviously, to talk about how we do things. We have pioneered an approach to research impact to encourage greater exploitation of research for impact in different industries. And I'm also responsible for commercialization of research in universities generally. So very interested, but particularly interested to talk about horticulture because I started my career in the Institute for Horticultural Research, actually Glasshouse Crops Research Institute in the UK, and quite a lot has happened in 40 years. In my first job in 1976, I was committed to finding out how research could help the industry, the horticulture industry, and that has been my driving force throughout my whole career in other industries in addition to horticulture, that research should make a difference. It should make a difference to every citizen in our country, their quality of life, and of course, we should share in the global push. Now, 40 years ago, horticulture was very different. I was burning fossil fuels in my work, modeling the growth of lettuce and looking at how you could enhance the environment with CO2. Things have changed. We hadn't thought about food security at all, and the costs of transport were not seriously considered. The government didn't consider horticulture seas industry. It clearly always has been in the Netherlands, and indeed I did some work with Wageningen all those years ago. But now, of course, we are concerned partly around the Sustainable Development Goals and indeed net zero. I was concerned because research in those days was not engaged with the big players in the industry. We did do a lot with small communities of horticulture growers, but there was a big gap between our researchers and those who were engaged in growing. Lots of small players and poor engagement. Well, we have moved forward, haven't we? Horticulture is a major industry, particularly in the Netherlands, but important here. We have a 21st century understanding, which speakers have already talked about in connection with the SDGs. Still, though, I think, certainly in the UK, limited research engagement with industry and a gap between the way researchers view the world and the way growers view the world. And I think it remains, well, critical to deploy our research insights and to align and this will be my first point, our research objectives with what will deliver benefit for our industries and for horticulture today. What do we mean by research? And I think one of the challenges I've faced in working with different industries is my researcher colleagues, my academics, have very different views of what they are trying to do. I'd like to point out, I think our general understanding today, the idea that you do research, it develops new insights, you pass those insights to someone, they implement them, and you have achieved impact, that is not an adequate view. First of all, we are not driven by what the challenges are, we're driven by how a researcher sees the world. And I think it's important that a researcher should see the world through his or her eyes, but also through the eyes of government and their priorities, and through the eyes of the industries and people we work with. So it's not a question of a linear model where you do something and then other people take responsibility. This is a shared responsibility to identify research directions and then to take them forward in a collaborative and creative way. We talk a lot in the UK about knowledge exchange, about how all kinds of knowledge, some of which indeed will be gained from research, some of which will be tacit knowledge gained from engagement, how that knowledge exchange can go on with those who want to learn from research insights. We want, I think, to do research, some research that is driven by a perception of deep underlying problems, but we also need a research portfolio that looks at issues and the approaches we address, we take to address issues. Perhaps this is mission-based research, but I'm not too keen on any kind of jargon, any kind of words to express it, as much as we need a greater shared understanding of what the issues are between those responsible for research directions and implementing and those who are our taxpayers and fund much of the research that goes on. And of course, also with industries who also fund, we'll come to that. I'm somewhat sensitive to arguments around academic freedom. Of course, it is right that we should allow our academics the ability to pursue directions without suppressing what they want. But nobody is entitled to spend public money without some challenge around the responsibility that comes with being given the funding. So yes, I want free thinking and ideas, but I want the responsibility to do that thinking in the context of the people who they live with and work with. And I think too, the ownership of research must not be seen as an ownership just by academics or indeed by universities and their research leaders, their presidents or vice chancellors or whatever, nor indeed research institutes and their directors. This is a shared effort in ensuring that research meets the needs of society. I think scale issues are important here. We cannot work, in my view, with wholly top-down driven research objectives, nor, I think, can we work with just bottom-up, we had an idea research objectives. We've got to work collectively together in building networks around understanding the issues. It's no use stating what the sustainable development goals are unless we sit down and discuss with all of the parties involved in the research effort how they understand them and what the challenges they see are. And I think there are problems sometimes with our research objectives being too big, whereas in fact, sometimes you need to tackle problems at a lower scale. So I don't go with economies of scale because I think you also get the opposite diseconomies of scale. Can I just, before I go on to funding and interaction, can I also talk about metrics? There's an absolutely great presentation coming from Clemens, who's been kind enough to share the results of his work with me. And I think it really, there's more than he can present in one day today. I think the content that I read. One of the things you've got to do is quantify your outcomes. You have to use metrics, but I think you've got to be very careful about the choice or indeed the limit you place on the metrics that you have. And that's been a particular challenge in the UK, where our government just wants to know which numbers to look for to measure success or otherwise. I'm particularly sensitive because a lot of our work takes place in a spin-out world where creating new small companies is viewed as a success. And in the UK, that particularly is because of pressure to copy Silicon Valley or MIT, Boston in the States, who are thought to be the best at spin-outs. But actually our work suggests, and what's more, work in the US suggests also, that the spin-out way of sharing knowledge and generating new impact is a very small part of what really achieves success. As we say, only 3% less, actually, I think, actually, of MIT's income is from spin-outs. Spin-outs are not great at creating new jobs, nor are they great unless you give them a lot of time at creating big businesses. So I think we need to have, again, a portfolio of research which doesn't emphasize any metric too much, but looks at different ways of achieving research impact. Largely we do that in the UK on a comparative basis rather than an absolute basis. And it seems to be one of the approaches that's taken too much in Europe is to look for specific measures of success. You need to look at different kinds of success appropriate for different audiences and different groups that you're working with. So this is my be careful about metrics or you may regret it. You may get the metrics right and discover you haven't actually solved your industry's problem. Now, I think cost is important and engaging our industries to fund research is certainly a major theme in the UK. In fact, one of the particularly important themes, because government funding research is quite good in the UK, but private funding from companies is particularly poor from those countries that are UK based as opposed to multinationals. Now, any company that is not willing to back research is not taking a forward-looking view, and indeed that is a comment that many have made about some kinds of UK companies. But it's not just about investing cash, important though that is, and we have a strong theme of what we call leveraging private income by sharing risk with companies. It's important, I think, to engage them not just in spending money, but in time, because it's the engagement of staff in companies, particularly staff who understand their customer objectives with researchers that will lead to success. So I'm very positive about in-kind support, which I think Clemens will talk about. Not that you can survive on in-kind support altogether, but that it's a necessary, in my view, commitment of the company to take part in research. So moving to my last slide, which is not coming up, excuse me. Ooh, I want it to come up. Here we go. Using impact as a driver. So ultimately, researchers will do what they see, perceive, gives them credit, benefit, reputation, money. And to that end, I think the research funders and the government have got to recognize and reward impact and successfully impactful research in providing incentives for researchers. And that is a challenge to me for the whole research system. In the UK, we run a major research assessment exercise, and it's been very easy to build impact in as an element of that, so that each of our university departments is encouraged to display success in developing new knowledge and success in impact from knowledge. I think that is system success is a way to send messages to our researchers that we validate their commitment to impact and we value it. I cannot really talk about different methods for recognizing and rewarding research success in different countries, although I know from colleagues in the Netherlands that this is something that is important to you too. So in summary, we need more engagement between those active in horticulture and those doing research in horticulture. We need shared understanding of the issues, and we need shared measures of success that don't particularly look at any one element of impactful research. We need incentives for researchers to participate, to recognize that what they are doing is valuable. This is talking about, in my view, a system change, and how that is best carried out in each country is the responsibility of the country. How it's carried out in each industry depends on the level of engagement. And I'm really impressed with the agenda for today and the level of engagement that's shown, and grateful for the opportunity to participate. Thanks very much.
I'm not sure if you can see me, David, but thanks a lot for your presentation, and we have some time over for questions from the audience. So who has a question to David? The box, I can throw the box.
Well, his last sentence was about system change. England of course. How do we do that when we look at the balance between the economies and the cooperation between countries? Because this is a very costly operation. It costs a lot of money to get to the system changes. How do you look at that?
Have you heard the question?
Yeah.
If you could repeat the question closer to the microphone, please.
Then you can try this one.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. You talk about the system change, and I look at the scale. System change in the scale of Europe, or only the countries separate? Because I think it's important that also countries are cooperation, look at what we achieved with COVID-19. A lot of countries work together to get a medicine and a vaccine. How do you look at that? Do you have any ideas how to cooperate in the system change?
I think it's easier to achieve system change in the context of countries than in the context of Europe. It's sort of dangerous for somebody from the UK to make comments about the European approach. I very much enjoyed a lot of collaboration with the Commission, but it takes time to get the agreement of 27 countries to change. In fact, it's very difficult. So I also think that horticulture is an industry where the issues are more specific to the country than in other industries, and where I think it's important. I mean, the Netherlands is a real leader in this, and I think it's important that the Netherlands therefore takes a lead in system change. I think in general, where we've talked about impact in different industries, the real progress has been made in country rather than across different countries, because each country wants to see its research system in a very special way, whether or not that's right or not. They want to do that.
Okay. I have a question myself. I got the impression from your presentation that there was a strong focus on the universities or the academics in the UK. Now, a little bit of the secret in the Netherlands is that there is a strong collaboration between the university and, you could say, the research institutes. We have many applied research institutes in the Netherlands. And of course, at the level of the applied research institutes, there is more interaction with the industry. How do you look at that situation? And what do you see as examples in the UK? For instance, the collaboration between the AgTech centers and the universities. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, it's not so good, I think, to be honest, because far more of the research is carried on in universities in the UK than in most other countries. To give you an example, I used to work for the Institute for Horticulture Research. In the end, that was put into universities, and 2 or 3 of our universities are the major players in horticulture now. So I just think the UK isn't the best model. My own view is that if you have a model with research institutes, it's tremendously beneficial to the research institutes to work with universities, and it's tremendously beneficial to the universities who otherwise find it difficult to develop impact from the research if they don't work with research institutes. So I think there's a strong driver for both parties to do that, but there's not always recognition of that in the leadership of the universities. Our universities can tend, well, they are in the UK, they can tend to think primarily of themselves. And one of our approaches in the UK has been to break that barrier down by embedding institutes within universities, but challenging the universities then to deliver on the commitments. That's a serious point about our big umbrella organization, UKRI, which does the project funding alongside my block grant funding. We do a lot of work encouraging institutes to work with universities. But I think the Netherlands is just different. I think you have a very strong research system in the Netherlands.
Okay, now thank you for that. And once again, a big applause for David. And please stay online because we have 2 next speakers, and afterwards we have still 15 minutes for an open discussion, and you're also invited to be part of that discussion. Great. So my next question was for you, Jaap, being our book build spirit of the top sector. What did you learn from these 3 presentations?
First of all, David, you missed my welcome in introduction, but what David Sweeney and Annemiek Robeek both said is that cooperation is vital. We have to cooperate on all the sectors. That's why I asked the question about Europe, because in regulations, there has to be a balance. Because when the Netherlands go ahead and they are busy with a radical change, we have to make sure that the regulations are correct. But cooperation is essential. And I think that also cooperation on at least a European scale is essential when you look at the rules, because rules can be a border. The second conclusion is the system change. You both mentioned them, and Annemiek mentioned them in a radical change. And then the question comes up, how do you find the balance between a radical change and earning the money but producing the food? Because we have responsibility. So you have to find a balance in that. So how radical is the change? That's the question, and also I think a very interesting question for this afternoon, for the debate we will have. Because we have to find a balance between between different fields. Look at becoming also example Europe, the Green Deal, from farm to fork. There are some elements in those documents which put us not ahead, but put us back. So that's interesting, and that's what I meant with radical change, cooperation, and on what scale. And where are our responsibilities when it comes to, we have to make sure that not people will die of hunger because we have radical change. That's a dilemma. Then the third one, the Netherlands could be leading, and that's also what I told in my introduction on some subjects. So that's where we have to take the lead. That's where our responsibility is. So we agree on that. And then I go back in time, and then we have the experience farms, the proefboerderij. We had productschap. I think now is the time that it breaks us up, that we haven't that construction anymore, because that's where we have organized substantial money, but also fundamental money for fundamental research. And that's, I think, part of the radical change, And these are the three subjects I got out of the two presentations as very important. And also as the subject which in the top sector and also the mission-driven top sector and the mission-driven items are important. So I think there are a lot of things we agree on, but I think the discussion will be on the details and how to perform it. How do we do it? How do you find the balance between producing food, vital food, healthy food, tasty food, and how do we earn the money, but also have a responsibility. That's the balance we have to seek. And I think the debate this afternoon will help us with that.
Do you want to react on Jaap? Any of you?
I think he gives a very good summary, and I think it's so nice to see that we are all more or less on the same page. And I think that is also why the reason for that is that we all understand that this is a very special time, that time of transformations. We really have to come up with new things. And although I understand that Jaap says that I'm very radical, I think a top researcher is radical. Otherwise, you should not be a top researcher. And the other thing is that if you want to have societal impact, you have to be even more radical, because the steps towards society are much longer than only within your own bubble or with only with your own collaborators. So I think it is so important that there are people who say, well, this is something we in the Netherlands can work on, and it is for the world. It's not for us only. I mean, my concept with on-site fresh food production is not for the Netherlands, because we do have all these production sites here. It is for the world, because there we see these structural problems.
Okay, thank you very much. I will go back to the audience, and you're the first, because you already my question is a little bit in the line of Lee already told about, because my impression was this is about the impact of science on society, and in this troublesome times where the world is in peril, I think science should take more responsibility. They also did that 300 years ago when we were in the golden age and religion was the solution to everything, and then science came. We had the Renaissance, and we had science became the answer to a lot of problems then. But what happened to science now is that it has become institutionalized and it has become part of the capital system. And I think that the whole problem here today as well is that we are only thinking about in the box and not out of the box, while all the answers that the planet needs on a world level are within science. And how is your specific question today? Do you agree on this, you could say, standpoint? And do you have any optimistic views how to get along with it? Because we like to end up optimistic always, right?
So David, this was a question for you.
Well, okay. Yeah, let me say two things. First of all, out of the box implies very radical. I think it is good to specify radical directions, but then to modify some of those radical directions as you get input from those who are involved, because then they own what's going on. So my line is my line is aim for radical, but be prepared to compromise and listen, because I think there's a limit to how out of the box you can take your academics.
I'm an academic and I'm an entrepreneur, and I think that is the solution. And I think that at the same time.
So David, yeah?
I agree with that, but I think not all academics want to be entrepreneurs. My line would be, I can identify academic entrepreneurialism, you should support it. And again, system change is about offering support to different kinds of academic activity. So I think I would go for that. I think so in terms of, we also have to take the public with us. Now in the UK, science has done very well as a result of COVID. It's had much more discussion in the national media, and although not always sympathetic to scientists, it's gone quite well. So I think this is a time to think about how we increase our engagement with the public around science, how we support radical directions while we being able to compromise, and how particularly we support those who are themselves willing, they're willing to change, so help them change.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, but therefore I think I came with that example of how you can do that living lab together with Nemo Science Museum in the middle of town.
I think it's a perfect issue that we pick up later on in the debate, but I really would like to go to questions from the audience.
But that was a question for me.
Yeah.
Not for you.
Okay. My name is Jan van den Ende and I'm professor of horticulture innovation in Erasmus University. We are discussing impact here, and there's a lot of talk about collaboration and connecting researchers to society and contributing to broader societal goals, and that's all very good. My question is, shouldn't we also include the discussion of the scope of research and innovation in the scope of research? And the background of the question is the TKI program at the moment is very much focused on plant sciences. And today, the issues in the horticulture sector have a lot to do with technology and management. There was a lot in the speech of Annemiek. Technology, autonomous growing, data exchange, robotics, but also management. Entrepreneurs in the sector today have to think about, do I have to grow?
I think your question is.
There's private equity, there's mergers.
If you want to answer, you should stop.
Okay, so shouldn't the TKI program not focus more on those issues?
Yeah. Okay. I think the answer should come from you.
I agree. It's now very much on technical and engineering, too little on biological.
No, it's the other way
It's
around.
not- the other way around. Sorry. But what we see now with the Wiebes and Hoekstra funds, and that's a fund with a lot of money in it, that's specially built for these subjects, because when we see what comes in, next gen, biotech, boost, switch to sustainable food system, three very big programs. We are talking about it this evening because we have to put them in before the end of October. And these are a lot of money in that growing fund, and that's specially made for these issues. So the solution is in that fund. And will that then be transferred to the sector by means of the TKI program? No, it's a separate program, and that's the reason why they put it not in the TKI but out of the TKI, because it has to be new, it has to be entrepreneurship, and it has to be. It is focused on what we're good at in the Netherlands, and the examples I just mentioned, the projects I just mentioned, are very much on that level. And these are also programs which have a long-term view. And also aimed at research. Yeah, research, but also entrepreneurship, because that's one of the main issues which is wanted by the Commission. They look at that. It has to be new. It has to be new entrepreneurship, and it has to make a radical change on some of the things we are doing
I
now.
didn't know about it.
The Wiebes Hoekstra fund is very much.
The last question is a very short.
A very short question. My name is Alexander Pinson. We talk a lot about plant science. What I do miss are bacteria and fungi as a beneficial for plants. And what is TKI Outcomes Prism doing on that research? Because without bacteria or fungi, we have no life. So.
I can answer it. No, once again, so there is lots of research also focusing on bacteria and fungi, and not only in this top sector, but also in the top sector agri-food. And of course, and I think that holds also true for the things you were mentioning, it really starts with the demand coming from the industry. And if they want to have a project in place that really relates to where they, what their main target is, then you will have a project on management or, you know, but that's how it works in public-private partnerships.
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, no, let's talk about it over coffee, because now we have a break. You have 30 minutes